Parenting through COVID is obviously a little different to parenting in every other season. You all thought you were not homeschoolers, and all of a sudden you are, and you did not choose this. And even though today I'm not going to focus so much on the school part, I just want to extend um, an invitation to you to be in contact with our Evergreen or Tall Trees team, where several people are homeschooling and extending support. Please don't go through this journey alone if this is hard, because it is hard. Um, Today, I'm going to focus on another aspect of parenting, not just the parent slash teacher at home role, but the role that you play in managing and helping alleviate the fear of your children. Now, some of you may listen to this going, I think I'm the one who's struggling with fear. It's not exactly my child, it's me. Then this program is also going to help you, because I'm going to unpack the types of fears that are very predictable based on our personality. And that's why I have my little tree illustration up again, because I'm going to talk about one tree type personality at a time and what their fears typically look like when faced with something like this. I mean, we're all going through a pandemic for the first time in our life. As a friend of mine, Keith Glover, recently said, I thought it was such a profound phrase. um, it helps us have compassion with ourselves and other people. None of us have done this before. There's no book about this. There's no how to parent through a pandemic, how to keep reinventing yourself to have an income during a pandemic. There's just nothing for this. And so um, first of all, let's acknowledge that there are going to be new fears we have never seen in our own hearts and in our children's hearts. I don't ever think of myself as a very fearful person. One of my books is titled Fearless Free, so I kind of promote this whole idea of having no fears. But this is not helpful when the fear is already there. Um, it's helpful to learn the kind of truths that help us stand against fear, such as knowing that God has promised to take care of us. That's a protective truth. That is something that helps us not even uh, allow the fear to stick to us, the fear of losing our income, etc. So when truths can be put into place ahead of time to protect us from fear, then I'm all for it. And I think knowing who God is, who we are in Him, remembering the promises that He has given us regarding our children, all of those truths are really wonderful beacons to hold on to when we're in such a sea of fear. But I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about these fears that we never saw coming, and suddenly our children are voicing them, we are feeling them. How do they relate to who we are, and how can we help? Um, Now, when I think of fearful personalities, I think first of the boxwoods, and I have quite a significant amount of boxwood in my mixture. Remember, temperament means mixture, so even though I'm talking about these four tree types separately, they really usually occur in combination in us and in our children. So this little boxwood, who is so perfectly organized, is an information hungry personality type. So what these children are doing is they're listening to every word we're saying. They're also listening to what we're not saying and filling the gap with the worst case scenario, because that's kind of how the boxwood brain is wired. So they just said on TV that we're not going back to school anytime soon, and my mom is not saying a word. It must be really, really bad. So yes, that's how they fill in the silence when nothing is said. So the first thing we need to understand is that in order to manage their fears, they need information as much as possible, as soon as possible, with as much lead time and warning as possible. So as soon as you know that grandma is tested negative, you need to tell them, because they're holding on to that fear of that result minute after minute. If you have to call the school to tell them in the classroom, then you do that, because that fear will sit at the pit of their stomach until they know that everything is okay. Please talk about every aspect they are concerned about without telling yourself it's not a child's responsibility or it's not a child's issue. Because they are smart enough to figure out that this may affect your job. They are smart enough to figure out that if they lost one of you, it would be devastating. And their thoughts are going there. A wonderful tool to figure out what they are thinking without planting fearful thoughts in their mind by saying things like, do you worry about what would happen if I lost my job? Which maybe there was this one fear they had not thought of, and now you've planted it. So I can understand that you don't really want to have these conversations and put all these fears on the table, but to access the fears that are already there, sentence completion is a wonderful technique. So we tell our child, so during COVID, schools are closed because, and then they may say, children spread germs. And then we know, okay, there's a fear of that happening. Or we can say, so during COVID, a lot of people, and they may say die, or they may say lose their jobs, or they may say never see anybody that they love again. So depending on how they complete that sentence, you can often access the secret fears that are there. I got to know a Boxwood mom here who is part of our homeschooling community, or she's a mother to a Boxwood son. And when the pandemic started really spreading via community spread here in our area, she suggested a homeschooling activity where we could plot the number of new infections on a map every morning. Now, you know, without children as a school activity. And I thought, okay, we're going to have outrage on this little homeschooling group any minute now. And so before the outrage could get going, I posted her name and I said, your son, from what I've come to see, is a boxer who loves information, and his anxiety levels are brought down by having numbers and figures and something he can track. I think it's a brilliant idea for him. And then I left the rest of the sentence unsaid, namely that it would be a horrible idea for a lot of the other children, especially at a tender age. But for them, it was a great solution. She knew her son, and she knew that seeing that little line, even though it was going up, made this invisible thing visible and a lot less scary. Answer every question honestly. Don't lie to your Boxwood. Bring proof. And there are many online resources of news that are translated for children to follow and teens to follow, like access.org or World News for children. Find a resource like that for your Boxwood who needs to know what's going on in order to feel safe. And as you're making decisions regarding your family life, include them in those decisions that are old enough to help you decide. For example, where are we going to sterilize our groceries? Where do you want us to put them down? What kind of a mask would you like to wear? A little bit of a decision-making influence and information. Moving on to the next introvert, let's talk about our pine tree children. Pine trees, in my mind, are the peacemongers. They are the ones who hold harmony at the core of your family. But they are also the keen observers, as I've said in a previous episode of this Facebook Live. They watch and they see a lot more than we realize they're seeing. So their fears usually center around the people that matter to them. They're not just concerned about you and grandma and grandpa and their siblings. They're also concerned about each one of their teachers. And every little news report that brings another group of people into their world, those people will be added to their concern list. They can sometimes take on the concerns of the whole world, because a lot of leaders like Nelson Mandela or Gandhi or Mother Teresa have this pine tree sense of social responsibility at the core of their design, and your pine tree may have the same thing. So one of the ways in which we can alleviate their anxiety is by helping them understand who the people are that should be their concern and who the people are with someone else to be taking care of them. Mr. Rogers of the old American TV program that the movie was made of recently called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, where Tom Hanks played Mr. Rogers, is a beautiful illustration of a pine tree and a person who spoke to children as though they were pine trees too. So if you have a pine tree and you can track down anything by Mr. Rogers, it's a beautiful way to address the fears of children. He did it compassionately in a calm voice, on their level, but without mincing words. And he passed on a lesson that he said his mom taught him, that whenever you saw something horrible happening, like a catastrophe on TV, a natural disaster, maybe even things as scary as a school shooting, and in our case, all of these pandemic related deaths, his mom said, and he said it to us, and I'm saying it to you today, to say to your children, look for the helpers, because there are always people helping. And this is the part that will encourage and help your pine tree cope. Is there's always help, and there are always those who are also concerned and compassionate. And when we focus on them, we are less afraid. So help them understand all of the programs that are in place, all of the subsidies, all of the loans, all of the special drive-through testing facilities, anything that may help them understand that nobody's going to go through this thing alone. And when they start voicing fears, you're fortunate, because usually they don't voice. Usually they just secretly process this. But when you see behaviors such as them being clingy, such as them asking a lot of questions about where you're going and when you're coming back, or them asking to call their grandma, and them not voicing the fear as such, but kind of hinting at a sense of separation anxiety, then it's your cue to start giving these assurances. Hey, we know what the symptoms are, and we will get tested if it's needed, but we are feeling great today. And hey, we have all sorts of plan in place if something should happen to any one of us. You don't need to worry about that. We have worried about it, we have made a plan, and we are not concerned. Very important to communicate those things. And if there are losses in the family and losses of people and the loss of not seeing friends and the loss of not seeing teachers, help them bridge that loss by writing a note, drawing a picture, sending a voice message via WhatsApp, or doing something else to connect, because that fear of being left alone and being disconnected is also at the core of their being. And then we think of these optimistic palm trees and we go, well, they're not afraid of anything. They are so brave. And rose bush is even braver, but that is not true. They also have fears. Being alone and unliked and unloved are the core fears of a palm tree. Remember, they've lost their audience. They've lost the people that they play with. They've lost the ones who keep telling them how fantastic and cute and wonderful they are. So they've lost their feedback that they are okay. That's pretty scary. Will I ever have an audience again? Will I ever have my fan club back? Is something they will not voice in so many words, but some of their behavior may have already hinted to the fact that they don't know if they will ever be in that place where they are celebrated again. And we need to replace that need, but then also help them understand this fear and help them reach out and make social connections and have fun and laugh with others as much as we possibly can. And there are wonderful, safe online games that kids can play 2x2 over the internet and in a safe place, and even in a Zoom call that you can Google and find and explore, because those are really ways to alleviate this fear that I'm going to be alone, that a palm tree is likely to experience. The rose bushes have a fear of losing control or not succeeding. And most of the hard things they go through now are related to things that got cancelled. It's that game that they were going to play with their sports team. It's that league they were going to participate in. It's that project that they were going to finish. It's that grade that they were going to complete successfully, and other goals that they may have had. And if you have a thoroughbred rosebush child, you will know that they have goals from the age of 14 months, let's say, when their goal is to not have you put on the diaper and your goal is to get it on. And you remember how that turned out. They can be pretty determined. So even in this time of COVID, they have goals, they have things they want to achieve. But if you're locked up at home, it's hard to achieve and it creates anxiety. And we often forget that anxiety is just fear in slow motion. It's the same emotion, it's just extended. So that anxiety of I'm not getting anything done, I'm not getting out, I'm not influencing people, I'm not changing the world, shows up in our rose bushes in the form of anxiety, fears expressed as just this general unease. And we can't tell them when everything will be back to normal, so it's hard to alleviate those anxieties. So what we can help them find is all of their talents that they can still use, all of the things around the house, within your family, where they can still make an impact and a difference, because that helps them breach this fear of not having meaning and impact anymore, of not making a difference anymore. There are so many skills we can learn inside and outside of the house, such as, enrolling in one of these fitness challenges, trying to learn a new skill, learning to solve the Rubik's Cube, learning to say words in a new language. Anything that will feel like a goal that they can still reach in spite of this pandemic is something I would very quickly enroll my Rosebush kid in if I were you. Remember that all of their choices have been limited, and that in itself causes anxiety for these children who are the decision makers, like the Rosebushes and the Boxwoods. So create opportunities for choice for them as well. There are just family principles that act like a shield to anxiety that I want to quickly remind you of in closing. That will also be therapy to your own heart if you struggle with anxiety through this season. The first one is eat together. Wow, and I hear a lot of people saying we did so much more of that now that we are not enrolled in all of our activities. Just that action of sitting around the table, looking each other in the eye, being available to wait for that pine tree child to feel safe enough to say, I'm worried about grandma. Just that space that you create for communication and eye contact and sharing is more powerful than you will ever know. All research ever done says eating together as a family is the most powerful force against teen pregnancy, suicide and depression in children, drug use, early sexual activity, anything you can imagine that could be a threat to your child is pushed back just a little bit by every meal you have together as a family around the table. Play together. Games, whether physical or a board game, create a rhythm, a predictability, a sense of turn taking and control and laughter, everything else that happens in a game. All of those things are essential emotional needs you and your children have in this season, whether you realize it or not. So play, play, play. Stand together refers to knowing what you stand for as a family. So discern what's going on here. There are agendas at play here that are spiritual, and if your children are old enough, verbalize them. Say, you know what Satan would like? He would like us to be angry. He would like us to be angry at government. He would like us to be angry about the laws. Let's not play into his hands. Let's submit as God commands us to submit to the authority so that we can have peace. Let's not go into that anger. Do you know what the enemy wants us to do right now? He wants us to be afraid and to forget that God is in control. Let's not do that. Let's once a week add a new scripture to our "We Can Trust God" jar. Anything you read in your Bible that we read, we're going to write down on a piece of paper, and once a week we're going to affirm that we as a family still trust God. This is what standing together means. Also, dance together. By dance together, I mean keep a rhythm together. Hold a routine. when we work with children who have been victims of horrific abuse and extreme trauma, we have learned that one of the most essential components to healing them on a deep level, where the healing goes to their bodies and their memories and their emotions and their minds, is that there needs to be a predictability and a rhythm. So you can shield your children from the trauma and the fears of this time just by keeping a routine in your household. And not the routine of go to bed now or you get spanked, but just the predictability of there will be a dinner time and then there'll be a story time, and on a Wednesday this is what we eat, and on a Friday we always go here, even if it's in the car with the windows rolled up. A repeatability. I remember one morning just sitting having my quiet time and having a particularly anxious morning, and I thought of this being so much like the flood in the days of Noah. And I read that piece again, and I read about the beautiful rainbow in the skies, a promise that God would never annihilate people by means of a flood again. And I thought that's a great promise. But there was another promise there. It said, and the seasons will never pass away, day and night, and the seasons will never pass away. And I am somebody who loves the change of seasons. I love seeing spring come, and then summer, and then fall, and everything turning new colors, new flowers come out. The whole process um, of the four seasons. I just love it. And I took such comfort from just knowing God says, right up until the end, you're going to see this rhythm. There is always a tomorrow where the sun rises again. Build that comfort of the rhythm. It's always morning again. Maybe wake them up in the same way every morning, just something that they can bank on when everything else is shifting. And now, just so that we don't extend this too far, I'm not going to say all the other togethers. Just be together, just do together, just talk together, just sit together, celebrate together, cry together, pray together. Everything you can do as a family in unity, even if there are fights involved. It's not all bad to fight. It's not all bad to get really annoyed with each other and to tell each other as much. It's all part of growing up as a human being. But do this together in this season as an antidote to the fear. I love how God always said, do not fear, as a means to enable us to love, because He put those as opposites all through the Bible. Perfect love drives out all fear. And so as you get as close to you can as the kind of love that God has, you are driving out fear, no matter what tree type you or your children are. May God bless you, fill your home with that sort of love, and push all fear away from your mind and heart, both during the day and during the night. Amen.